What is so mysterious about the story of Goliath that no one ever told you? Because this battle wasn't just between a giant and a boy. It was a duel between two forces far greater than anyone imagines. What if I told you that Goliath might have been more than just a man? What if he was a remnant of something much older, much darker, something the Bible mentions, but few truly understand? The Nephilim. Colossal beings, descendants of the sons of God and the daughters of men. But who were these beings? And more importantly, why were they almost completely erased from history? What the Bible doesn't say explicitly might be even more terrifying than what is written. Because if the Nephilim really existed, then Goliath may have been just the last piece of a puzzle that connects humanity to a forbidden past. And now comes the most unsettling question: if Goliath was defeated, does that mean the Nephilim lineage truly disappeared? Or is there still something hidden, something that doesn't want us to discover the truth? If you think you know this story, get ready. Because what I'm about to tell you might completely change the way you see this battle. Imagine a man so massive that even the strongest warrior would look like a child beside him. Goliath wasn't just a soldier, he was a monster of flesh and bone. A colossus over 9 feet tall, covered in bronze armor that weighed as much as a full-grown man. His spear. A massive pole with an iron tip weighing nearly 7 kilos. To put that into perspective, that's heavier than many entire swords. With every step he took, the ground trembled. Every movement was a warning of imminent destruction. And the Israelites? They simply froze in fear. But was Goliath just an incredibly tall man? Or was there something more behind his origins? Goliath didn't just defy soldiers, he defied logic. How could a man be so big? How could he carry so much weight and still fight with agility? To the Philistines, he was a living weapon, a true titan on the battlefield. But some people began to wonder, was Goliath even human? Or was he a remnant of something far older, something history tried to erase? Records speak of the Nephilim, giant beings who walked the earth in ancient times. Could Goliath have been a descendant of this forgotten lineage? The answer might change everything you think you know about this story. The terror Goliath spread was real. For 40 days straight, he stood in the valley, shouting his challenge. "Send me a man to fight." But no one dared to step forward. Can you imagine the scene? An entire army, paralyzed. No warrior dared take a step forward. Not even King Saul, who was the tallest among the Israelites. Fear. Pure fear. And who could blame them? Who in their right mind would charge at an indestructible colossus? Against a warrior who seemed to have stepped straight out of legend? And what if I told you this kind of situation happens all the time? No, I'm not talking about giants roaming around. I'm talking about challenges that seem impossible. About situations where everything around you makes you believe you don't stand a chance. How many times have you felt small in the face of a Goliath in your life? A financial problem, a fear, an insurmountable obstacle. The truth is, we all face giants. But the real question isn't the size of the enemy. The question is, who dares to face him? Goliath wasn't just a warrior. He was a symbol. A symbol of domination, of absolute power, of unshakable arrogance. His mere presence made the Philistines believe they had already won. And in a way, they were right. Because when fear takes over, the battle is lost before it even begins. But, what if someone thought differently? What if, in the middle of that terrified army, there was someone who didn't see Goliath as an invincible monster, but as a target? And that's when something unexpected happened. While the soldiers trembled, someone stepped onto the battlefield without armor, without a sword, without fear. Someone who shouldn't even have been there. Someone who wasn't a warrior, but just a shepherd. A young man with no combat experience, but with something that no one else had. His name? David. But hold on, how could a boy with no military training even think of challenging Goliath? What did he know that no one else did? What secret did he carry within him that made him walk fearlessly toward the impossible? And that is exactly what we're about to uncover. Because this story is far from just a duel. It hides a much greater mystery. 40 days. For 40 days, Goliath stood in the valley and issued his challenge. "Send me a man to fight." His voice echoed through the mountains, reverberating like thunder. But the response? Silence. No warrior dared to step forward. No captain volunteered. Not even King Saul, a strong and experienced fighter, had the courage. But why? Goliath hadn't even lifted his spear, and yet he had already won. How? He wasn't just fighting with his body, he was playing with their minds. Fear. That was Goliath's real power. The giant knew that if he could make his enemies believe they were defeated before the fight even began, he wouldn't even need to battle. And it worked. The Israelites were paralyzed. And that's exactly how the true giants in life win. They make you doubt yourself before you even try. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever felt that weight on your chest, that certainty that something is too big for you? That's the mental game. And Goliath was a master at it. But wait, why didn't the whole army just attack Goliath at once? Have you ever thought about that? If everyone charged at him together, could he really have held them off? Probably not. But they were so trapped by the idea of a one-on-one fight that they didn't even consider other options. They were playing by the rules that Goliath himself had set. And that's the mistake many people make in life. When you accept the enemy's rules, you're already at a disadvantage. But would anyone realize this? And here's another detail no one talks about. Goliath issued his challenge in the valley. That meant that whoever left the Israelite ranks would have to go downhill, enter an open terrain, and face the giant in a battlefield where he had every advantage. This wasn't just any duel. It was a trap. Goliath wanted the fight to happen on his terms, in his territory. How many times have you stepped into a battle where the rules were set by your enemy? And what happened next? What if I told you that Goliath already knew no one would face him? Think about it. A trained army, full of armed soldiers, and none of them accepted the challenge. Something was wrong. Could there be more to this story than we've ever been told? Goliath, the one the Israelites knew but didn't want to admit? Was there something more than just his size? A hidden legend, a mystery in his blood that made no one want to be the man who would go down in history as the one who dared to challenge a descendant of the Nephilim? And what if the king himself was terrified? Saul, who was described as a tall and strong man, should have been the obvious candidate to fight Goliath. But he remained silent. Did he know that this battle wasn't just against a warrior, but against something older and far more dangerous? Something beyond what the eyes could see. And here comes the great twist: while the entire army was paralyzed with fear, someone stepped onto the scene. But he wasn't a warrior. He wasn't an experienced soldier. He was just a young man. Someone who had never wielded a sword in combat. But for some reason, he didn't see Goliath the way everyone else did. While others saw a monster, he saw an opportunity. And now, the big question: what made this young man different from the others? What did he know that the seasoned soldiers didn't? Why wasn't he paralyzed with fear like the rest of them? And then, the unexpected happened. While an entire army trembled before the Philistine giant, a young man stepped forward. But pay attention, he wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't there to fight. He was just a shepherd, sent by his father to bring food to his brothers. Someone who, in the eyes of everyone, shouldn't even have been there. But it was precisely this unlikely piece that set in motion a game that seemed already decided. David arrived at the battlefield and couldn't understand what was at stake. The army of Israel was paralyzed because Goliath was seen as some kind of untouchable entity. He looked at the warriors around him and saw something that deeply angered him: fear. A fear that made no sense to him. How could an entire army bow before a single man? What was so special about Goliath? And more importantly, why was no one doing anything? Here comes the most striking detail: David wasn't a warrior, but he wasn't a coward either. He was someone who had faced real dangers, alone. While tending his sheep, he had already fought lions and bears. And he had killed them. Without a sword. Without armor. Just with his own hands and a sling. To him, facing Goliath wasn't much different. After all, what was a giant compared to someone who had already confronted wild beasts? But there's something here that almost no one realizes. While the entire army saw an undefeatable monster, David saw an enemy with a weakness. Goliath was huge. But being big can be a disadvantage. He was slow, overconfident. And David knew exactly how to defeat enemies like that. And that's when everything changed. David started asking, why isn't anyone fighting this man? And this question shocked those around him. Because it exposed a truth no one wanted to admit: the entire army had already been defeated before the battle even started. Goliath hadn't won with his sword. He had won with fear. But David wasn't playing that game. And now, the question that changes everything: what makes someone see opportunities where everyone else sees defeat? What made David look at Goliath and see a target, while everyone else saw a monster? What did he have that the experienced warriors didn't? And more importantly, would you have had the same vision if you were there? When David said he would face Goliath, no one took him seriously. A boy against a monster. Ridiculous. The soldiers laughed. His brothers mocked him. Even King Saul tried to talk him out of it. You're just a boy. But David didn't back down. He knew something no one else did. David didn't rely on strength. He relied on something much more powerful. Something invisible, yet lethal. Faith. But not just any faith, an unwavering faith. The same faith that had made him face lions and bears in the wilderness. The same faith that made him see a chance where everyone else saw defeat. He looked at Goliath and saw a lie. And here's the secret: while everyone saw Goliath as an indestructible warrior, David saw a mere man propped up by the fear of others. And the fear of others meant nothing to him. Because David knew that a giant might be big, but if he falls just like anyone else. But Saul tried to stop him. And when he saw that David wouldn't give up, he decided to help him. He had armor, a sword, and a shield brought to David. But there was just one problem: none of it fit David. He wasn't a soldier. He didn't fight like the others. He understood that if he played Goliath's game, he would lose. And here's the turning point: David simply refused it all. He didn't need armor. He didn't need a sword. He only needed what he already knew how to use. He took his sling, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, and walked onto the battlefield. Now think about this: the entire army was trembling, experienced warriors were paralyzed, but a boy with a sling was about to face the greatest warrior in history. Does that sound like madness to you? Or did David know something no one else did? And here's the big question: what makes someone run toward a challenge that everyone believes is impossible? What did David do differently? Why didn't he hesitate? What did he have that Goliath didn't? And then, the moment arrived. On one side, Goliath, the Philistine monster. A colossal warrior, with bronze armor gleaming under the sun, his spear capable of cutting a man in half. On the other side, David. No armor. No sword. Just a boy with a sling and 5 smooth stones. But here's the detail no one noticed: David wasn't afraid. Imagine the scene. Goliath stares at David and laughs. This kid is the best Israel has to offer. He mocked. He cursed. He swore he would crush David like an insect. But David was unfazed. While everyone else saw a monster, he saw a man with a massive target right in the middle of his forehead. And then something terrifying happened. While Goliath marched forward, full of confidence, expecting David to back down, David ran toward him. That's right. David didn't wait. He didn't flee, he didn't hesitate. He charged into battle as if he already knew exactly what would happen. Goliath raised his spear. But before he could strike, it was too late. David placed a stone in his sling, swung it swiftly above his head, and fired. The projectile cut through the air. A fraction of a second. And then, impact. The stone struck Goliath right in the center of his forehead. With incredible force, it sank into his skull. The giant staggered. His eyes widened. And then, the impossible happened. The monster that everyone feared, the warrior who had humiliated Israel for 40 days, fell. Heavy. Massive. Dead. Silence overtook the battlefield. For a moment, no one could react. The indestructible had fallen. On the ground. And then, what happened next was even more shocking. David did not hesitate. He ran to Goliath's fallen body, took his sword, and decapitated him. The giant didn't just fall. He was annihilated. And then, panic. The Philistines, who were certain of victory, saw their champion slain by a mere boy. And they ran. The war that seemed won was turned upside down in mere seconds. Now, the question no one asks, how did David know this would happen? How did he foresee an outcome no one imagined? Was it just skill? Just faith? Or was there something more? Goliath fell. But, he wasn't the only one. Most people know the story of the Philistine giant defeated by David, but what almost no one knows is that Goliath had brothers. And they were not ordinary warriors. They were monsters. Formidable creatures, giants as terrifying as he was. And they were waiting. Now, imagine this, do you think the war ended just because David defeated Goliath? Wrong. Because when one giant falls, others always appear. And Goliath's brothers would not let this go unpunished. Historical records speak of 4 other Philistine giants. One of them, Ishbi-Benob, attempted to kill David years later. And he almost succeeded. His power was so great that a single blow could have ended it all. Another, named Saph, fell in battle against the Israelites. But the strangest was yet to come. There was one who was different. A mysterious warrior, with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. Does this mean anything? Or is it a clue to something much deeper? A genetic connection to something, inhuman? But here's the most important detail, if Goliath and his brothers were part of a larger group, then how many other giants walked the earth? Were they the last remnants of a lost era? Or are there still buried secrets we don't know about? And what if I told you that Goliath and his brothers may have been just the last of a much older and more enigmatic lineage? Because the Bible doesn't just talk about giants, it speaks of the Nephilim. Colossal beings, referenced in Genesis, as a hybrid race, a cross between the sons of God and the daughters of men. But who were these sons of God? And what made them so different? Here's the terrifying part, the Nephilim weren't just big. They were anomalies. Beings with immense strength, advanced intelligence, and a presence that inspired fear. And what if Goliath was a direct descendant of this forbidden race? That would explain his height, his superhuman strength, and even the fear he instilled before he even fought. But in reality, it means that the Nephilim were never fully destroyed. Ancient records speak of giants in various cultures. The Anakim, the Rephaim, the Eman, could they all be part of the same lineage? And if so, could traces of their genetics still exist in the modern world? The gigantism we know today could just be a mutation, or it could be something much more sinister, a remnant of a past that was meant to be erased. Now, think about this: if the Nephilim were real, what else has been hidden from history? What led to the destruction of this race? And the most disturbing question, were they really eradicated? What if I told you that there's something even more shocking in the Bible that links the Nephilim to one of the most catastrophic events in human history? The flood. Yes. Goliath may have been just an echo of something much greater that God tried to wipe off the earth. Now, pay close attention. If the Nephilim truly existed, then why did they disappear? What happened to this race of giants that terrorized humanity? The answer may lie in one of the most catastrophic events in history, the Great Flood. And what if I told you that Noah's flood may not have been just an act of judgment, but an attempt at eradication? Yes, because Genesis doesn't just say that humanity was corrupt. It says that the earth was filled with violence. And who were the violent beings that dominated the earth? The Nephilim. This means that the flood may have been a response to something much darker than just human sin. Something that was altering God's creation. Something that needed to be wiped out. But here's the question no one asks: if the flood destroyed everything, then how did Goliath exist? How were there still giants after the flood? Someone survived. Here's the most terrifying question: some theorists suggest that the Nephilim lineage could have continued through Noah's wife or the wives of his sons. This means that the blood of the giants may have been preserved. And if that's true, does this lineage still exist today? And what if I told you there's something even more sinister behind this? Because this isn't just an ancient story. This is a story that may still have ramifications today. If giants once walked the earth, who's to say they won't return? Now, stop and think. From Goliath to the Nephilim, from colossal warriors to the Great Flood, what does all this mean? Why does the Bible mention these beings? Why were they destroyed? And what does this story have to do with you? The truth is, this isn't just a story about giants. This is a story about the power of faith against the impossible. Goliath didn't fall because David was strong. He fell because David knew something no one else knew: victory does not come from the size of weapons, but from the unshakable certainty of who is in control. Here's a great lesson: fear defeats more people than any army. The soldiers of Israel fell before Goliath without him even raising his sword. But David won without even getting close to the giant. The difference? Belief. Courage. Vision. While everyone saw Goliath as invincible, David saw an enemy already defeated. Now, think about this: how many times have you imagined a Goliath in your life? How many times have they told you that something was impossible for you? That you had no chance, that you weren't strong enough? And how many times did you believe it? Because the great truth is, the biggest enemy is never outside. It's in your mind. But here's the good news: just as Goliath fell, any obstacle can fall. The secret is in how you see your challenges. Do you see giants, or do you see targets? Do you see defeats, or do you see opportunities? And now I ask you, what will you do with this knowledge? Because in the end, it doesn't matter how many giants are in your way. What matters is whether you will face them, or let them defeat you before the fight even begins. Now that you know this story, what will you do with this information? Because this is not just about Goliath, or about giants. This is about how the impossible can be brought down. About how what seems invincible can fall before those who know how to see beyond fear. David didn't win because he was strong. He won because he saw the truth. He saw what no one else saw. And you? How many Goliaths are in your life? How many battles have you given up on before even fighting? Are you living like the soldiers of Israel, paralyzed, accepting the rules imposed by the giants around you? But here's a powerful lesson: the size of the enemy doesn't matter. If you know where to strike, he falls. And if this story has proven anything, it's that giants only seem invincible, until the moment they fall. Now, I want to ask you, what is the Goliath you need to overcome in your life? What has you paralyzed? And most importantly, what are you going to do about it? If this message helped you see something new, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this. Because this story isn't over yet.